Dear students, welcome at the first webinar of the CEPUS Network, Women Writers in History. My name is Katja Mihurko-Ponish and I am the coordinator of this network. I'm also professor and researcher at the School of Humanities at the University of Nova Gorica in Slovenia. Our network exists since April this year, and it consists of 8 universities from 7 countries, from the Central Europe, Bulgaria, Croatia, Czech Republic, Romania, Poland, Serbia, and Slovenia. The aim of this network is teaching and studying women writers from Central Europe using digital materials and tools, and therefore our first webinar is dedicated to the tool that most of the network members have used in their researches, but also in the teaching process. Today, we would like to present you this tool and share with you some good practices at 2 Slovenian universities. I'm very honored that today Dr. Susan van Dijk has joined us, and she is namely the initiator of this tool. Susan van Dijk is a senior researcher at the Huygens Institute for the History of the Netherlands in Amsterdam. She is specialist of the 18th and 19th century women's literature in French. Working on the Dutch reception of these French women writers, she found that international reception needs to be studied at a larger scale. She took the initiative some 15 years ago, and many of us are very grateful to you, Susan, for this. And she created around an online database, New Approaches to European Women's Writing, an international network. This was successfully financed by different foundings such as COST, Clarin, HERA, and is now a DARIA working group, Women Writers in History. Susan van Dijk was also a guest professor at the Ruhr University in Bochum and is an honorary member of the University of Nova Gorica. And now I would like to ask you, Susan, to present the VRE to us. The screen is yours.
Yeah, we'll try to
also, yes, share the screen.
Share the screen.
The co-host of this webinar.
You see my screen indeed?
Not yet.
Sorry.
No problem. I have your presentation, and perhaps if it doesn't go, you can start and I will share it.
I click now here, share screen.
Yes.
Once again, probably you need to look right down right. There's okay.
Okay.
That's it?
Yep.
Yeah.
You see it?
Yeah.
Okay.
No.
Yeah. Okay. Okay, so here we go. Here you see the beginning of a list of names of women authors for whom we have been integrating information in this tool. As you see, there are over 6,000 women in it, starting by Sappho and continuing until the early 20th century with, for the moment, Anne Frank as the most recent person. For all these writers, we enter information. We have entered this information in particular after reception documents we have been working on with the different colleagues of the group, but also together with colleagues. So thanks to these reception documents, which are of different kinds, obviously, we enter information on 3 levels, as you see here: data about the woman, the writings, and the reception of the writings. You are really recommended to see that this is work in progress, because when finding women authors' names in periodicals, for instance, let's say 18th or 19th century periodicals, very often there is not much of supplementary information about this woman. So depending on the possibilities of finding more information, the records are more or less complete. And as, for instance, students are invited to collaborate, this is also work which could be done in some cases by interested students. So here we see the possibilities of grouping these women. This is the same list, over 6,000 women, sub-4 on top. And you see at the left side, we can classify them according to their nationality, also according to the fact if they are author or if in fact they represent, the name represent a pseudonym. And both names and pseudonyms can be male or female, because it's obviously important to include the receivers, which very often, if they were critics, were male. For finding individual authors, you enter a name and you see it appearing on the right side. You click on it. In this case, it's George Sand. I'm working myself on French literature, so I took a French example. Hopefully you will recognize her name and her portrait here also. You see on the level of the biographical information that these are really very basic elements. At the left side, you have possibility of seeing more about her personal or professional situation, the list of publications, reception of the author. So there are different options. We will not all of them look at now, but as you see, you can click for seeing all her publications, and you find here the top of the list, which is a quite impressive list of 149 results. Among these also smaller pieces, obviously. But here, this is the chronological order, starting by Rosée Blanche, which she wrote together with a male colleague, and then she continued working on her own. Here again, you see at the left side the possibility of categorizing. You see the different genres she practiced, many of them novels, but also other genres. And the work types here are only works and, for instance, no articles. She published quite some articles also in the press and created actually also periodicals herself. So here, clicking on Indiana, which was indicated also here, Indiana is an important work. It was her first work. It was really internationally successful, written when she was 26 years old, 28, sorry. And so for each of these publications, there is the possibility of seeing the receptions, of going to an online text, and also of having a graph. But the graphs for the moment are quite problematic, so I will avoid showing you. Colleagues are working on it. Concerning the reception, here you see part of the reception, the top of the list of translations, where you notice that there is just the name of the translator and a title, or even just a mentioned title in Spanish, when we found it in lists presenting translations without specifying the title. In most cases, Indiana remained Indiana in foreign languages also, but well, obviously not always. You see the numbers 11 and 13, or not 11 and 14, are mentioned as the translator unknown. Here is again proof of this being work in progress. You can also go to the online text, as is mentioned on the left side. This is what you see here. The online texts are not made available by ourselves in the project, but we are just linking to online texts that are made available elsewhere. In this case, by the Bibliothèque Nationale à Paris, in a project called Gallica. You see, this is just an image, actually. It is not a searchable text, but, well, we do with what is there. In Slovenia, sound was also quite intensively received. A colleague of Katja has been working on lending libraries. So you see here the top of the list of books that were present in this lending library. In Russia, she was quite early also and intensively received. Here you see a number of translations which were done by Russian women. This is also just a small part of the list, as you see. You can also go to it yourself and see what other translators' names you might find and recognize, for instance, etc. And here, Dutch reception, which obviously I've been working more on than about Russian. Here we are looking at comments. Many of these comments are from the periodical press, but they can also be, of course, in private documents or in different kinds of other sources. I insist here upon one of those articles, number 6, which is by a really important Dutch literary critic, who interestingly was rather negative about sound. And you see here the possibilities of the record. There is this part entitled Notes, where we can drop our interesting and important thoughts, or take some quotes, or ask questions to colleagues or so. Here you see some notes which were taken when, for the first time, this information was added in the database. You see it's in Dutch, but there's one part of the sentence translated. This critic said he did not wish Georges Sand or the woman hiding behind this pseudonym to be imprisoned. That not, but apart from his not willing her to be imprisoned, he was not at all in favor of her publications. The interesting thing is that later on, this periodical, which is a really important periodical, still in existence, in fact, was put online. So we could have the direct access to the article, where we found, sorry, I've here the cat who is quite surprised about my speaking to the computer. Here you see that the article seems to have been rewritten. His declaration about his not wishing Georges Sand to be imprisoned was replaced by the part of this sentence saying that she was misusing her genius. So for the moment, and until I don't know when, I'm not aware when this rewriting of this article took place, but it's an interesting proof of this critic having become aware that really Georges Sand was above all these kind of qualifications, and that she was so popular over Europe and all over the world, actually in Japan also, for instance, that he adapted his vision on this aspect of Georges Sand. So this is really one of the important aspects of our having in this way access to all kinds of digitized text online. This came by surprise, but when really searching, we will find certainly more. On the other way around, Georges Sand herself was also a reader, and she commented upon her reading, and she wrote prefaces, as for instance this Uncle Tom's Cabin by Beecher Stowe, who we are of course familiar with also, I think. So this is liable to lead to something like a visualized network. Here I give an example showing Dutch women of 19th century, in which Georges Sand also was quite influenced, because all those Dutch women also read Georges Sand, referred to her, commented upon her, had pictures hanging on their walls, etc., etc. So this is what we are heading to, let's say. And more generally, the tool provides all kinds of possibilities, in our view, for interested people, students or others, to collaborate to this large project, but with a focus on their own concerns, on their own authors, or whatever they would want to study within this context, so that everything they will have done and added to the database is at the same time useful to other colleagues. This is obviously a kind of research which we need to do together. There are thousands of women. We cannot handle each of these on our own. So the collaborative aspect is, in our view, extremely important and is possible thanks to this kind of tool. So for those interested here, you can access the database. If you want, you can take contact, and asking for a password, you can have access. I think this is it for the moment. And I hope it has been clear enough. Otherwise, just ask.
Thank you very much, Susan, for this concise, clear, and very informative presentation. We will collect the questions and the comments after all three presentations.
Okay.
And now I would like to explain how I use VRE when collaborating with students as a mentor for PhD thesis and as a teacher. First, I would like to say why is VRE useful as a teaching tool. And this is, in my experience, because it covers a wide range of activities. So when I'm preparing my lectures, I can use the outcomes, but not only my lectures, also, of course, my research. I can use the outcomes of this research. And as you have seen, there is a lot of information about women writers. So I can always go there and look for this information. And Susan has shown a part on the, I think it was one slide before this last one, a part of my textbook. Yes, thank you very much, Susan. This is actually an open educational resource, and it is entitled Literary Formatters, Women Writers in Dialogue with Tradition of Their Own. I will later put the link in the chat section. And in this textbook, there are tasks for students with instructions how to find information and use the VRE for studying women writers. I see VRE as an important tool within the process of teaching women's presence in the literary field at different levels. BA students can become familiar with women's too little known contribution to literature by searching in the VRE for information, because it is open. You don't need any password for this. MA students can they study individual cases, but also contribute to it by entering data, as my students has already done. And in the framework of the Erasmus exchange program, a student from the University of Belgrade came in 2017 to the University of Nova Gorica, and she stayed with us for 4 months. And in this time, she entered and curated many data, and she also contributed to the database Knjiženstvo, which will be presented in our next webinar. It can also be very useful as a tool for the PhD students. Susan has already mentioned my PhD student, Tanja Badalic, who used it when researching the reception of European women writers in Slovenian multicultural territory of the 19th century until the end of the First World War. This was the title of her research and a PhD thesis. And Tanja's main source was the paper catalog of receptions of foreign authors in Slovenian periodicals preserved at the Institute of Slovenian Literature and Literary Studies at the Scientific Research Center of the Slovenian Academy of Sciences and Arts in Ljubljana. She entered all the data from this catalog about the reception of women writers in Slovenia into the VRE, and thanks to her, at least a part of this paper catalog is now digitized. Her contributions to the VRE also enabled visualizations of the receptions in the Slovenian field in the HERA project, Traveling Text, which have been done by the students of the Faculty of Computer and Information Science. Now I have a pleasure and honor to introduce the mentor of these students, Professor Narvika Butson. She is researcher at the Computer Vision Laboratory at the Faculty of Computer and Information Science at the University of Ljubljana and Associate Professor for courses in Graphic and New Media Design. Dr. Butson has authored scientific papers and new media art projects that have been exhibited in Slovenia and abroad. Since 2016, she has been the editor of the scholarly journal Likovne besede, Artwords, and in her presentation, she will show and explain some wonderful visualizations done by her students. So, Narvika, welcome, and the screen is yours.
Thank you, Katja. Hello to everybody. I will share the screen now. I believe that we see my screen now, yes? Okay. I will show you some visualizations that were done by my students of Computer and Information Sciences. They did these visualizations by using the database, Women Writers, more or less like Suzanne at the beginning explained how the database is structured. And basically, in most cases, the students of computer science had also the task to browse the database for the categories to understand its structure and to be able to pose a question about literature on women writers. And so basically these visualizations are answers to these separate questions, many separate questions that were posed by the students. However, not all the visualizations were done in this way. Some visualizations were done also by the, excuse me. Oh, by a collaboration when the Okay, I don't know why it didn't work. When researchers of literature prepared the question, and the students of computer science were making just the visualization. So I'm just going through the images to make you see how many these different styles of visualization can be done. And for example, if we look at this one, it shows women writers from France and different types or genres of literature that wrote the women writers, and they are connected to the genres with these graphical lines. So in the upper side of the screen, you can choose the time for which you want to inspect the popularity of certain genres, and then also for other countries. Many visualizations showed receptions between different countries. These were also animated. They are all statistical presentations. And actually, when a visualization like this is made, it has to be read, interpreted. So it's not only used in teaching when it's created, so that the computer science students learned something about women writers literature, and also about designing visualizations. But when this is prepared, these visualizations are prepared, they can be interpreted by other students, maybe by students of literature, because they offer not just searching for specific data in the database, but as they have this visual component, they enable us to compare visually. And for example, here in this one, we have literary works from England and France. They are put together on the screen, and immediately we see where there's more production and in what time when we compare the two countries. So this is just one example. For example, this one shows the receptions of Georges Sand. On the upper side of the circle, there are receptions of her works, and in the lower part of the circle, there are receptions that she wrote on other works. And of course, color coding is used for different types of receptions. And you can zoom in to see more in detail. For each dot represents one reception. So this is like interactive diagram, interactive machine that helps you to read data, not in a way to read just a list of data, but to read it in a visual way. So here, for example, we can see that there's some mistake in the database. These are how long women writers lived. It's obviously a mistake, can be corrected. Visualizations also show us mistakes, and they are used also for this purpose. Here we can see which women writers had most receptions, and so on. And also timelines of women and their works, and the works of other women that she read, so it can be compared visually on the screen. For example, visualization of Spanish authors was a more complex one. It showed the network of the authors that knew each other. Only one knew the other, or they both knew each other, or they collaborated. So there were 3 levels of awareness. And also it shows the network of women writers in Spain that wrote for the magazines, the selected magazines. So you can also filter according to a certain magazine, and then show the connections where these women met, at least by reading each other's works. And finally, this was done in collaboration with Suzanne van Dijk and Aleš Vauputic. It's an interactive, like a video game. Here I presented the quotations of women writers on other women writers. And so each women writer is represented by a house in this landscape. And as you walk to the next house that you see in the landscape, you can read the quotation on the upper side of the screen and reflect on it while you move. So it's a specialized experience of this network of quotations on women writers. It's also testing the way of gamification as making more approachable, such, for example, a database, making it more interesting maybe for younger students to use. Of course, we can also change the contents. It's, yeah, as a model of communication. And sometimes, I mentioned literary scholars propose the questions that were visualized, and sometimes also students of literature from the University of Nova Gorica at the courses of Professor Aleš Vauputic. They prepared research questions and they gave those research questions to my students and they prepared the visualization. So it was also done in this direction that the literary student wanted to know something, to see it visually, to be able to compare it visually, and then we collaborated and did this presentation. I think it was a great, it is a great tool. It was a very nice experience also for my students to enter another field. I believe they wouldn't know about women writers at all because they don't learn it in primary or secondary school. And then, of course, when they study computer science, they don't learn these things anymore. And I am very happy that I can give them this database with this kind of content and make them aware of the women writers and their great works. So Katja, thank you. I'm very glad that you invited me to collaborate with you and to have this presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. This was just one of our collaborations because I think that we both very much like to collaborate, to put together students from the informatics and humanities, and it is always interesting to supervise them and see how they collaborate. And thank you very much for showing us these wonderful visualizations and explaining them. And now I think it is time to invite our colleagues, participants of this webinar, to ask questions. So you can write them in the chat, you can raise your hand and ask them. So just unmute yourself and just ask the question or just comment on something if you feel like. Please. Perhaps in the meantime, I can ask you, Narvika, how are these visualizations accessible? Can we have access to them, to use them in our teaching courses?
The interactive visualizations, we should prepare a platform where to publish them and make them accessible. Of course, they were done with processing, and processing is developing every year. There's a new version, so the older versions don't work anymore. So we have to remake the visualizations that stopped working, at least to some degree. But the documentation, the images that I showed you now, they are all accessible also in the monograph that Katja, you edited and is published on the University of Nova Gorica website. So I guess that's also a very good source, because there's also the description of how to read these visualizations and some comments that we understood after making this project about how to prepare this kind of visualizations. So of course, if somebody is interested, we can make a new visualization on new questions, on new topics, and also organize the visualizations in the way that can be accessible later on. It's always with new media that you have to take care of them after some time to make them functional, yes.
Yes, that's true. So thank you for this answer. And now I don't see anything in the chat, but perhaps someone would like to speak.
Okay, I went to the link, Katya, you left it in the chat for your book. But as I understood, we need to have something like a password to get into it.
No, it is an open educational resource, so you just click on the link.
Perhaps I did click on the link.
You did.
And it says must be at least username, okay, email address.
No,
okay, so you send the registration and then
you don't need anything.
Well, this is what I see on my screen. It asks me for email address, for passport. Actually, I should, as much as I can see, I'm the one who should then make a password for myself.
No.
So it's a bit complicated, as I.
No, it's not complicated. Okay. I think you should try again, perhaps.
I'll try it now and see how it works. Okay.
Yes, there is. I will put it again, so perhaps something went wrong. Okay, perhaps any other comment? I will also, as I promised, put the link of this monograph, because it is also open access with these 3 chapters written in the HERA Traveling Text Project. But let me see if there is any other question or comment.
Can I ask something also? A question for Narvika. Do you think it might be possible for people non-linked to your university to also ask questions which you might discuss and visualize with your students?
Yes, yes.
Yeah,
of course. Yes.
Okay, well, I have no specific question now for the moment, but I will see if I have something that might be usable. You will judge, of course, if it is, and then okay, thank you.
Yes, thank you. We prepared also for Marina Dragoten a few visualizations on many questions on Norwegian women writers. Yes.
Okay.
We would be happy to do it. Yes.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Okay, so the second link is good. Thank you, Mirjana, for letting us know. So I hope that everything is fine now, and now I will also paste the link to the monograph. It's here. Perhaps any other comment, Susan?
Yeah, I wonder in how far over time you have been working with this tool and with your students. Have you been changing your approach? How did it evolve, let's say, over time? You see what I mean?
Is this for the question is for me or for Katya?
For Katja. For Katja.
What do you mean, Susan? I'm sorry. Can you ask me again?
You have been traveling with your student for several years, and with different levels of students. So have you been developing something like a specific approach? Have you been changing your approach? Do you feel completely comfortable with the way you use it during your teaching? Or are there also things you would like to be completely different?
Oh, yes, I understand now. No, I wouldn't say that I would like something completely different, but it was an interesting challenge to write this textbook because, especially because I wrote it, I created it in the time of the first lockdown, and I was then also using it as material for my students. And I think this was also an interesting experience, how to, let's say, prepare some questions, some materials in advance, and then discuss these questions together with them. So I think this is also a good opportunity that we have now somewhere all this data, and we can prepare questions and tasks, and then the students can work on these questions, and then we can discuss them, because it is very tiresome and also sometimes I think boring if the student just listen to the lectures, online lectures, but here you have the possibility to create some, as I said, tasks, and then can do it and then discuss with the teacher their work and also their own experiences. We have a question in the chat, but I don't understand completely how is this connected with our topic of this webinar. So I think this is something we could discuss in some other webinar, because the participant writes what objectives should I follow if I want to unfold my literature aspiration. For example, should I write more often of my ideas, feelings down on paper whenever I get a beam of inspiration? So perhaps anybody would like to answer briefly this question, or we leave it for another webinar to discuss the...
This is not one of your students.
No.
But when speaking about tasks for students, could you give some examples also? The authors you are working on, how do you have them working on authors? So you have, let's say, the tool and they have the data. What do you ask them? Just to add information, for instance, in the tool, or to read the author, or to compare between what the author wrote and what the critics comment? How are they working?
All this, and also I think it is wonderful that we have, as Narvika already has mentioned, these visualizations, because we have something before us and then we can discuss it, and also discuss the reception, how can we read these visualizations. I think this is also important if we teach digital humanities, so that the students can learn how can these visualizations show, yes, the content of our research actually. So to learn how to read visualizations is, I think, also an interesting task that we could perform.
Mm-hmm. And you have them, for instance, also look at this Estella Hertzfeld windmill.
No, because it should.
You're not speaking about foreign literature.
Oh yes, we do, but the Dutch women writers were not the topic of this course, so we focused. Yes, so this is really a challenge for the next one.
Yeah.
Thank you very much for proposing this. And I have another question in the chat. So the participant asked, let me read everything. Hello and congratulations for the development of the database. It looks very interesting and it seems to offer many possibilities for research. Would it be possible for you to send the participants your PowerPoint presentations? So as I have already mentioned, this webinar is, we are recording it, so you will find it in our YouTube channel of the CEPOS Network Women Writers in History. And I have to ask now Susan and Narvika, if I can also share this PowerPoint presentation at the website, I would say, of the CEPOS network, because there are many participants. I don't have all the mails, so I could upload this to the website of the CEPOS network, if you agree.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, so then you will find it. I will also now add a link to the CEPOS website. Perhaps any other questions?
Everything was so completely clear. Difficult to believe.
I would like to ask Narvika about the timelines. That is something that used to be so interesting, and I think it's still very interesting. Like you can have a timeline of whatever. I mean, Serbian women's literature development, or European, or something like that. So I remember when we started working on the VRE, and that was almost 10 years ago, I would say almost a decade ago. And that was one of the first things that we asked, can we have a timeline? And the answer at that time was that it was too complicated. So what is the situation now? Because I think I've been seeing timelines everywhere on Facebook, on whatever subjects. So, and I would still like to have one in my database, of course. I hope that the answer would be not that complicated.
Of course, yes, it's not complicated. Also, among those visualizations, there were many timelines that I showed just now. So if you want a timeline of all women writers, of all works, it can be made. It's not a problem. It's if you want it to be connected to the database, then of course that's something that the administrator of the database has to make, at least to allow, because we are not directly connected to the database. And these visualizations are done separately. So if you want to have as part of the database also some visualizations, then this has to be done in another way. I mean, institutionally. The administrator of the database has to.
Okay, I understand that, but I'm just asking about the
No,
IT.
no problem.
Okay, yeah, I think that our idea was that we had the biggest problems with the countries. with the names of the countries, because the Europe has changed in this long period of time. So the problem was to name the country where certain writers were from, because the names changed. And I think that was actually the initial idea of the timeline, like to help students to realize that the writer who is now mentioned as, for instance, Slovene, used to be Austro-Hungarian writer, or Austrian, or something like that.
Yeah.
So, okay. That's an interesting and important information for me from the expert.
Yes, yes. Also, what you say just now, it's something that I think should be done also partly in curation of the database, so that there is a category that states country, maybe not just the last one. For example, Slovenia, like now.
Yeah, we had
more countries.
A lot of discussion about that, and ended up maybe with the conclusion that the best way would be to name only the cities, but then it left another kind of problem. So it's not easy, actually.
Yes. I would really remember this discussion that we had a few years ago. I remember this discussion, yes.
I'm always thinking that the best way would be to use the current present day names for the countries, because it's just too complicated, all this mixing up and different moments where names of countries are changing into other names. I tend to be a bit skeptical about saying this is a simple thing. I'm sorry, Navika. I've been seeing quite some problems.
But I think that we're going back to the decadal discussion. I think that we are going back to some points of the old discussion, and it's obviously it's not easy from our point of view.
No, because when speaking about timeline, what do you want to show on the timelines also?
Yeah, well,
if it is just a list of productions of women writing and publishing in several years, what for?
Well, that depends. I was just asking in general. And I think that our basic idea was to show the changes in Europe, in the countries that Europe used to be made of. And I think that was the starting point. But there can be many uses to a timeline for various reasons, even within one writer, like the timeline of the writer's career and things like that. So I was asking just generally.
Yeah.
Yes. To make separate timelines, it's not complicated. For example, there was one timeline, I think, about Jane Austen, of her life and the publishment of her works. And then was also another timeline about women writers and their receptions. So the life of a women writer, the works as they were published, and then the receptions of those works in a certain country. So there are many timelines, but since you can ask so many research questions about this database, it's difficult to show everything, because there are so many entries.
Yeah.
And therefore it's easier, just also for humans, it's easier to see, to understand the visualization if there is less elements on the screen. You cannot just show 15,000 elements because we can't read them. And therefore we prepared visualizations for separate research questions, like focused asking focused questions and getting visualizations for those questions. It was not visualizing everything, because then you get a very chaotic presentation. It's difficult to orient in that kind of visualization. So
yeah, thank you.
But what you were saying, Navika, about the role of the administrative people and that administrations behind it, that's of course for the moment quite a problem, because officially we have not a project for the moment, so we have now not any financing from the outside. So this is what we are also very much discussing also with Daria colleagues who are very helpful, and I think this will lead also to conclusions. But for the moment, these discussions are going on. So, but indeed, the institute, needs to collaborate and needs to see the importance of collaborating with, for instance, Daria. So, well, it would be very helpful if more activity would be going on within the database, so that the administrators see that this is important for not just one or two persons. And at the same time, there are several technical issues which complicate also the use. So we are kind of in between problems and let's say. But any idea you might have, just send it, mention it. And in that sense, I'm interested in thinking about questions we might ask you and see in how far you can handle them and help us toward some form of answer or a way of handling it differently or whatever.
Yes, because if we ask separate questions, that's manageable to make visualizations. Otherwise, if we want to change the database, like adding categories of the names of countries from the past, that's a bigger intervention in the database, which is of course again on the part of the administrator and everything. Whereas with students we can work in a much more relaxed way and faster and without much complication. So it's experimental visualizations. So we can get some images of the database from that point of time when we are making them, because the database is always changing. New data is entered. So these visualizations are old that I showed you. It means that they use the data from that time. And now maybe there is much more data in it. So all the statistical data are limited to what is in the database. And of course, it's not everything. And it is changing in time. So that's also something that we have to think about. So it's not an image of what was in history, but is an image about what is in the database at that point.
Yeah, of course, yeah.
Yeah. So that's
yeah.
We are doing. We can do this fast. Now we are doing the research. We can also make a visualization, and it goes with this moment. And then in 2 years, the research will be maybe even different.
Yeah, but well, still usable and understandable, etc. So yeah.
Okay, so I don't see any other questions in the chat section. I also don't see any hands raised. So I would conclude that we can now finish, and I would like to invite you to the next webinar of the CEPUS network, which will be held on the 22nd of December and presented by Professor Biljana Dojčinović from the University of Belgrade. And the topic will be Knjiženstvo, a project in women's writing and digital humanities. Until then, enjoy the Advent season and stay healthy. Goodbye.
Yeah. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you also from me. I was catching up with you, but thank you very much, Navrika, and everyone for the interesting talk. Thank you, Katya, for organizing it. All the best.
Thank you, Katya.